So as Sylvie mentioned, I'm going to be talking about what's very grandly named the Strategic Communications Report. And this is something that we're happy to present here today as something that's been going alongside the results that Sylvie presented. The project team that's been working on this include my colleague Siri Panzer, who's the project manager, Mira Ghani, who's on this call, and Amira Sawas, who's also at Climate Outreach with me. Yes. So the idea behind this is that, as Sylvie mentioned, there are so many different perspectives with which people come to this topic. And this is about thinking about how we can talk about our work on economies and societies that dare to care together. And as part of this, we've gathered some expert guidance based on a couple of interviews with people who do research, who work in policy advocacy, who are in the arts, who work in disability justice, who do decolonial work, who do land defending, to talk about the risks, the pitfalls, their experience when it comes to communicating about care and climate, and together piecing that into with evidence from the academic world, from grey literature, from examples from practice and Indigenous leadership as well, to see what is already out there that we can see as examples of how to communicate about care between us, but also with the public, and what needs to be done further. And some of them will be pictured on some of these slides. I won't have time to talk about all of them. Just to say, this is still a work in progress as well. At the moment, some of the key takeaways that are coming out in terms of communication are on the left here. So one is that we talked to, in these interviews, it was clear that nobody really saw care and climate as competing in terms of causes and solutions. And in fact, a lot of people saw them as the same. And in places around the world, there is no distinction. And I think that's an important one, recognizing that our ways of understanding these issues and the way Sylvie presented it is coming from, I think 5 different perspectives, or versus a dichotomy as one issue, is already something that we need to be able to understand and talk about, and talking about the common threads between them. And part of this is also understanding that the working together, care and climate are twin issues, and their priorities need to go hand in hand. There's not sort of one more important than the other. That sort of links into the second point here, which is act with urgency and care. And this is a key example, I think, of what's coming out, is that sort of having a care sensitive and equitable, gender responsive and low carbon future, we need to look at what's commonly needed rather than prioritizing one set of outcomes over the other. And so we need to act urgently, and these actions need to be care responsive and gender responsive. The third point is about communication needing to be bottom up and place based. And I put communication, but this also very clearly needs to be solutions as well. They need to be contextualized and recognize that cultures, histories, politics, religions, and traditions all view care and understanding of care and people and in the environment in many different ways. And so, as always, our communication and our solutions need to be tailored to the context. And as I'll talk about later, there's a big problem with the amount of research that exists as being and where that's from. And the last point on the left side is interviewee spoke about working to join forces rather than fall into pre-existing or older silos that exist. So for instance, not only just working in healthcare or social care or environmental care, but really more and more as we're seeing these overlapping issues, we need to be working together rather than competing for resources, for instance. And then I've sort of done this left-right split because I think some of these aren't just about communication, some of them are about sort of they're quite a bit deeper and about changing sort of mindsets and the way that we look at these things. And Sylvie's already talked about this in terms of recognizing our colonial history and present. And this is an interesting one because there's some work being done on public communication around colonialism, decolonialism, and that's a completely different issue. But I think as people working in this space, there needs to be a recognition of the role that colonialism has played and still plays in shaping the barriers to a low carbon and care sensitive future. And that involves examining our own practices and their relationship to colonialism. So for instance, as a researcher, I know that research has a long and problematic history with colonialism. And unless we examine that, we risk perpetuating those problems that we're trying to solve. With the next point, we also sort of relatedly need to address imbalances in power, opportunity, and resources between the global north and the global south. That includes sharing where we can, power, resources, space, opportunities, and amplifying, and also recognizing when to step back. And the quote I've got at the bottom here speaks to this point about intersectionality. One of the interviewees, I haven't named them because we're not sure just yet how they would like to be identified, says, "We will not be in the buen vivir as far as we are not all in the buen vivir." And I think that really speaks to this, that in order to achieve this low carbon care sensitive future, we need to reach the furthest branches of the tree, and we need to center the needs of those who are marginalized rather than to seek to appeal to the mainstream. And this last one was an interesting one. It came up throughout the interviews as well, where I think there's this irony in caregiving roles of people who give care not receiving adequate care themselves. And so partly here, this is about practicing what we preach and providing care for the carers, whether that's knowledge and support networks or changing cultures and systems of working, as Sylvia also mentioned. So that's it for now. I'm really happy to discuss this and also hear other thoughts as well. In terms of the gaps, well, I mentioned that we did a mini review of narratives, and here there is some evidence for the effectiveness of nature narratives, of conserving nature, environmental protection, caring for future generations, of maintaining well-being, as well as values-based narrative messaging with the public about equality and fairness. And these do tend to work in certain contexts with certain audiences. But as I alluded to, the research is very limited, and it's mostly done in the global north, and it's mostly done in Anglophone countries. So there needs to be a lot more. And what we also found was a lack of sort of research around care as a holistic concept. So it was more, again, siloed, so more about healthcare or just about environmental care. On the side here, I've tried to squeeze in a lot, but these are pictures from some of the examples that we're going to cover that are sort of more practical, practical examples of how people have communicated around care. And looking ahead, this particular report is, the timeline is to finish writing in June, to be reviewed in July, and then released around August or September. And definitely looking ahead, there's a need for a lot more research, of course, always. We'd love to see testing narratives that can be used to communicate care with the public, care and climate change, and all of these complex relationships, and also with policymakers. And what's important here is to do this in different contexts, cultures, and countries, and with specific audiences in mind, and with local partners very much as possible. I think that's it. I hope that wasn't too fast. Thank you very much.